bit worried that I'm a little bit worried that today's video topic is gonna make me sound like an old fart, but I think it's an important thing to talk about. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the average age of pop stars seems to be very, very young. I did a little mini baby statistical analysis and I looked at the top 20 songs in the top 40 right now, and I went and found the age of every artist and of the individual like features and stuff. Then I averaged it out, and it turns out that the average top 20 person right now is 26 and a half. So then I was curious and I went back and I wanted to know what was the average age of some of the top famous people back in the 40s. So we're gonna go 80 years back, and their average age was like 35. That's people like Tommy Dorsey, Jimmy Dorsey, Artie Shaw, Glenn Miller, Bing Crosby, those kinds of guys. But is this a problem, and why did the average age get so much less? I wanna go ahead and start from the beginning, and I'm gonna give a theory here. You can let me know whether you think that this is right, and then we'll talk about whether this is a problem or not. It all goes back to the late 1800s. American society was very like agricultural. We had a lot of fields and a lot of farmers, and that was how we made a lot of our money and a lot of our food. And then we kind of realized, oh, factories are so much faster. Then Henry Ford came along and started making the Model T, and we started saying like, okay, if we're as efficient and fast as possible, we can make the most money, be the most successful, and be the most happy as a country, which led into the era of modernity, which kind of lasted from the early 1900s, late 1800s to around like the 1940s. And the basic idea of modernity was that with enough progress and enough work, we can create a utopia on Earth. We're gonna use these factories, we're gonna use these amazing progressions in science, stuff like, the radio, stuff like cars, but then also stuff like more advanced guns, weapons, and atomic bombs. And so everybody was kind of like, well, this isn't actually as great as we thought it would be because lots of people are dying. And then world wars happened. And we were like, oh, maybe it's not quite so easy to make the world a better place and to make it a perfect place. So then we kind of started transitioning into this era of post-modernity that was further enhanced by, the Vietnam War and the Cold War, and we're kind of realizing like, man, it's gonna take a lot of work to make this world perfect. And I would say that probably at this point, we definitely have some progressive ideology where we say, hey, we can make this place a better place for some people, and there are still some who believe that we can make the world at least much, much better, but there's definitely this distrust in the system, and we kind of believe like, okay, we're gonna have to come at this from a grassroots. We can't really trust the people on top to do what's right for us. But it's interesting to note, and we're gonna get into a little bit of race theory, sort of, and gender theory, because if you look back at the past, it's always been older white males who have been in charge and have been leading the charge in a lot of cases, at least on the public front, or at least what the public wants to acknowledge, because the public has been very racist in the past, kind of leading that charge towards this progression. And then all of a sudden, all these older white males are kind of the face of the groups that are getting us into world wars and messing things up. And so there's been definitely a distrust or a shift publicly, and not with every single subpopulation, but with a lot of them towards wanting, something different. We see that in politics, we see that in emphasis in literature classes, wanting to hear other voices. And overall, this is a healthy, good movement to try to bring more diversity into conversation and to try to give everybody a voice as they should have one. And it's also affected the musical scene, because as I was looking back at the 1940s, I was looking at all the most famous artists, they were largely white guys. There were a couple of females like the Andrews Sisters, and there were a couple of black artists like Ella Fitzgerald or the Ink Spots, but for the most part, it was white guys. And if you look at the math now, it's still very much male dominated, heavily so, but I would say that at some times, I think actually right now even, I would say that it's African Americans who are dominating the charts. Or in the case of Drake, Canadian American, African Canadians? Yes, that's what I was trying to say. Well, and of course there's BTS at the very top with their new song Dynamite. So I say all of that stuff about race and gender just to kind of illustrate how times have changed and more people have a voice more than ever. But the one thing that we're really talking about today is that the age groups are different in how they set up their voices, because we used to have It was much older. The songs were so much more polished. You didn't get the same kind of heart or the same kind of vulnerability in the songs that you were getting that went into the top 40s. Like, Galaxy really didn't like that point. But you had like this level of polish that was almost just kind of like fake, and like, here was this ideal, here was what progress looked like, here's what we could accomplish if we were perfect. At least, I mean, that's my read on it, is like they showed a lot of stuff that seemed to be the societal ideal. And now we have a lot of people, there's just so much difference. We're not as obsessed with this picture of perfection. It's more about this picture of individuality, and here's my way that I'm unique and quirky and different, rather than here's how I can fit into this perfect mold of what the ideal looks like in society. And I think that's an aspect of going from this idea of we can progress into perfection and turning into, well, maybe there's not really an idea of perfection. Maybe I should just try to find what suits me and we can find progress along the way somehow. At the same time though, the average age has dropped so much. And here is why I think that this is potentially problematic. Why I think it is problematic. Not that it's a completely bad thing, but why it gives me pause is because songwriters, whether they want to admit it or not, are like philosophical leaders of our day and age. We listen to what these people say, they influence how we think about ourselves, how we think about the world around us. Like they are some of the most influential people out there. Like, we take in what we hear from songs and it changes how we think or how we see the world. You listen to nothing but top 40 about having sex and about doing drugs, you're gonna start to think like that's the purpose of life. You listen to people like Taylor Swift or to Billie Eilish or to Tyler Joseph, and you're gonna get a much more introspective look on life, and it's going to teach you to look at the world a little bit differently. But there's something a little bit troubling about a society that doesn't get its philosophical drift or direction from people who have more experience in the world. And it's because life experience is where we get wisdom from and the ability to make important decisions well. And I just wonder if there's not some kind of a deeper issue with the fact that we're getting so much of our philosophy and so much of our perspective on dealing with life from people who haven't been around that long, maybe have been around less than we have, or only just a little bit more. Honestly, at least a little bit more is really nice, but a lot of them don't act like they have been, which is really problematic. I mean, you listen to Cardi B, who's 27, her song WAP just broke a bunch of records for being one of the most disgusting and vulgar songs of all time. DJ Khaled, his song that he's on the chart for right now is called Popstar. This guy's 44 and he's writing a song called Popstar where the chorus, he has Drake singing, "Bitches calling my phone like I'm locked up non-stop. From the plane to the effing helicopter, yeah, cops pulling up like I'm giving drugs out." Where's the focus on, like, I don't know, there's no sign of the wisdom. There's nothing that I can get out of the song that makes my life better. If these people are whether they like it or not, they're thought leaders just by the fact that millions of people are listening to their songs, and yet there seems to be no sense of responsibility, no actual desire to progress, only self-glorification. And it's as if though these people that we've put up above us, that we want to hear from, that we value as a society, they're letting us down. And they would probably respond to that and say, "What are you talking about? I'm just doing what I want. I'm expressing myself and being my own person." And it's a little bit troubling because that's a huge emphasis on individualism, but at least you have a responsibility to your fans, don't you? To like help make their lives a little bit better instead of just bragging about what you have, creating a sense of envy, leading them into a life that so many people have committed suicide in, that shows itself again and again and again to be empty, just the ceaseless searching after pleasures and excitement and thrills that just leads to nothing. This is what it comes down to, is so much of music, so much of capitalism, a lot of what it is just focused on giving people what they want, and we as people take that opportunity to take what we want and what makes us feel good in the moment, instead of taking the extra effort to get what we need and what would make us better people. And I think that's one of the key aspects of a good definition of art, is good art makes us better people. When it's us plus art equals better us. If it's us plus entertainment equals happier us in the moment. Maybe worse us in the long term. I don't know if it's bad entertainment. So we need to be pursuing and looking for and supporting artists who make us and our lives better. A band like Half Alive has a really mature perspective and it's a really valuable focus. Jon Bellion similarly too. Of course, 21 Pilots. Taylor Swift tends to have a very a good perspective on things. I did pick a lot of artists on my Deep Pop Alternative mixtape, which I'll go ahead and link in the description so you guys can go check that out. And I've got right now 29 songs from artists who I think actually kind of help me to be a better person when I listen to them. So you should go check that out, follow it. And I would love to hear what you guys think about this. Am I just being an old fart, or is there something to what's being said here? Yeah. Comment that below. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.